Hello and welcome back to the Plug In for More podcast. One of the more glaring issues facing potential EV buyers is range anxiety. We have all heard the stories about how electric vehicles won't last in the winter and that maybe you're going to freeze to death in a traffic jam. But if you've been listening to our show, you know by now that these stories aren't exactly accurate. There are, however, some considerations that EV owners need to have when operating in a northern climate, and this episode will be the first of three in a series that's going to examine the issues facing electric vehicles when driving in the winter. Enjoy.
Welcome to Plug In for More, brought to you by EVUniverse.com. EV Universe is your one-stop shop for all things related to the electric vehicle. Here on this podcast, our goal is to educate, inspire, and hopefully make your transition into the electric vehicle marketplace a lot less intimidating. And now, here are your hosts, Mike, Tom, and Bryant.
This episode, we're going to jump into what you need to know for driving your EV in the winter. There's a lot of questions that have been coming up with concerns over range and battery longevity in the cold. And we really just want to try to hammer home a couple points and maybe try to get away from some of the myths that are out there, maybe the misinformation, because it's also always prevalent. Brian, what do you got, man?
Yeah, Tom, I'm getting a lot of questions on that as I'm driving around town. It's getting a little bit colder in Michigan, and people are
Wait, I'm
asking,
going to stop you
well,
though for a second. How is it to drive an EV around town? Because I don't know. I'm still waiting on mine.
it's the best thing in the world, Tom. You should experience it sometime.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't wait. I'm
It
sorry. I just was triggered there for a moment.
no, it's okay, you should be triggered because it's awesome. You're really missing out.
I
If
can't
you
wait
ever,
to know what it's like to drive an EV in the cold.
I mean,
No,
if you
I'm
ever
sorry.
want to
Continue.
ride, just let me know. I'm up for it anytime.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, people are asking a lot, like, "Hey, is that car gonna even work in the winter?" And what's are you concerned about your range? So, I'm getting a ton of questions. Yeah, I know Mike's actually owned an EV in the winter. This is my first time. I will say that I'm not seeing a massive range decrease yet as it gets colder here in Michigan. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. I'm seeing usually I'm about 275 miles on an 80-90% charge. This morning it was, as cold as 40 degrees. I had 265 miles. So I saw about a 10-mile difference. But nothing crazy. We'll see as it gets colder. But Mike's kind of an expert here. I was just want to remind people of kind of maybe why EV battery life is impacted by cold weather. The batteries on most modern EVs really have a temperature range, between 40 and maybe 100 degrees Fahrenheit, where they really feel um, where they feel good, and the batteries perform as they want to. Same as an electric vehicle, or same as a gas powered vehicle. When it gets cold out, uses more gas, things like that. And so the real reason why you're seeing less range is because as the batteries get colder, or if you live in a super warm climate, they get too hot, the car actually has to use electricity to make sure the batteries are at that optimal temperature. So they actually have battery heating inside of them, and the batteries have to get warmer in order to charge, in order to operate efficiently. So you're using not only the electricity to heat the cabin, but you're using electricity to run the battery heaters themselves, the battery conditioning to see, and then obviously you're driving. So you're using three different areas of electricity where if it's normal, if it's 60 or 70 degrees, you're not using probably two of those. So, Mike, what are your experiences and maybe some ways to mitigate some of the decreased range you experience in the winter?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing out of the gate is which car you're driving, and it really depends on what kind of heat source they're using. So if they have a heat pump, they're much more efficient than if they don't have a heat pump. So what if you look at different studies, and of course they are comparing at different temperatures and that sort of thing. But on average, you're looking at, for let's say a new Tesla Model 3, anywhere from a 1 to a 5% decrease when it's 70 degrees out or thereabouts to freezing. When you look at a car such as a Chevy Volt or a Mustang Mach E, which do not have heat pumps, those are losing around 30% in that same temperature range difference. So that's one thing to think about. If you're going to live in a northern climate, does it have a heat pump or not? So it might make your decision for you. So Tom, being a Mach-E soon to be owner, gotta think about that. So gotta pick a
Allegedly.
new, allegedly, yeah, if you ever get yours. So that's one thing right out of the gate is which car you have. The other thing is make sure you're this is for any vehicle. Make sure your tires are fully inflated. If you have snow tires on in the winter, because you again get a lot of snow, that's more rolling resistance, which is going to decrease your range. I don't care if that's a gas or electric, you're not going to go as far. Um, and then also, as far as tips on that vehicle, you want to make sure that when it's plugged in, if you precondition it for that EV before you leave, so that car is warmed up before you go, you're going to get the most range at that point in time. Again, tires fully inflated. You're
And
driving. Oh, go ahead.
just real quick though, can what exactly is preconditioning?
Yes, good point. Sorry, I jumped into that. So, preconditioning, for those who don't have an EV yet, is you can do it a couple different ways, but essentially, it's telling your car you're going to leave at a specific time. And so, when you do that, it will warm up the cabin for you. Again, if it's already plugged in, it'll warm up the battery. So, it's warming it up to that, again, preconditioned temperature. It's where it's at its happiest and it's most efficient. And so, when you do that, when it's plugged in, you're just using electricity from that charger from your home or wherever you may be. And that way, again, when you get in it, it's nice and cozy, the battery's happy, and you're going to be the most efficient.
I want to interject really quick too, listener. If you do have, so I just learned something this morning, right? So if you do have your home charger set up, so mine is set up to charge between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. to take advantage of lower electricity rates. I'm gonna have to change that to be 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. because when I take my daughter to school at 8, I want to make sure that I'm going to use that electricity from the charger. So I'm gonna set the limits from 11 to 8, and I'll have the car start warming up around 7:50. So I'll pull that out of the electricity out of the wall rather than the battery. So I just want to clarify too, if getting really specific, but if you do have a home charger set up on specific times, make sure you you adjust it in the winter if you're leaving a little bit later.
Yep, exactly. And some vehicles, it's going to be on the car or on the mobile app. Could be inside the car. It just depends on which car you have. So that is a very good point. Or it could be the charger itself. So a couple different areas. You can tweak those when that car is going to be preconditioned. Another thing is how fast you're driving. Just like any other time of the year, the faster you drive, the less range you're going to get. And same thing in the winter. You're just going to see that a little bit play out a little bit more. And again, the last thing, which is the first point, is if you live in a northern climate, get a car with a heat pump.
Yeah, I
That's
think
it.
that the speed is really interesting, Mike. Not just the winter, but I would say that's the number one question I get or I see in the forums is, "Hey, last week I was getting 300 miles. This week I'm getting 250 miles. Is the car broken?" And then the number one response is, "Well, did you take a road trip? Did you drive on the freeway?" And I would say 95% of the time, like, "Oh yeah, I was driving, 80 miles an hour."
Yeah.
Um, this you don't notice this in gas-powered vehicles as much because the range, I don't ever look at the range really, but this is the same phenomenon, right, Mike and Tom? Like, when you drive faster, even in a gas-powered vehicle, you get less miles per gallon. That's what we're really talking about here, right? Is the faster you drive, the faster your range is gonna drop, right? I mean, is this pretty common
Yeah.
sense here?
It is. I mean, especially when you look at the science behind it and the wind resistance, the faster you go, you're pushing the wind. And so that's why when you look at someone who's driving 45, 50 miles an hour, there's less wind resistance than if you're doing 125. And so you're again, you're pushing that wind out of the way, the air out of the way. So yeah, I mean, it's going to have a major impact. The other thing too, I think with EVs that gets people is the instant torque and that instant speed around town, which people love to utilize, myself included. But when you're having that quick acceleration over and over again, that's not great for your range. So if you have a little bit of a lead foot, you're gonna get less on a charge, just like you would on a gas car.
So speaking of torque, Mike, I do enjoy beating pretty much everyone off the line. I will say, quick story. Last night I went to dinner with my wife, and I've never been iced, meaning a big truck, usually diesel or big, 350 whatever truck, tries to pull in front of you and blow smoke in you. That's
That's
being
that's
called iced.
that's no, that's called rolling coal.
Well, maybe different terms, different regions.
Ice no, ice is when they block
I've
your
heard it.
charge when hey, time out, being ice is when they block your charger. That's what that
Well,
means. Rolling coal is
I've,
when they
I've
get in front of you and then they blow the smoke.
Well, I've been told both these things, so
Oh,
sorry.
they're lying to you, Tom. Or they're lying to you, Brian. I don't man, that's
I've never had it happen, so I don't know. That's why I
yeah.
don't know the proper
Okay.
term for it.
All
But
right,
the
there we
dude
go.
last night tried to what? What was it called? Blowing
It's called
coal?
roll call or rolling call. Yeah.
Rolling coal. He tried to do it to me and I wasn't paying attention. So he almost got in front of me. I was like, "No way, dude." Like, "No way." So, of course, if you actually pay attention, there's no way a truck can get in front of you in an EV. It's impossible. But I'm curious, my vehicle has snow mode and I've never turned it on. And I'm curious your experience with snow mode. Does it take some of that torque away? Because in the winter you don't
Mhm.
want all of that torque, right? So I'm just curious what your experience has been with snow mode.
Yeah, so snow mode from everything that I've experienced with it is it really it decreases the torque. It makes sure that you're starting off slower so you're not going to spin those tires so that if you're in a slippery situation, it's going to roll a little bit easier and you're not going to get into a situation where you're all of a sudden spinning your tires and then you're stuck not moving, which I know all three of us personally I've seen all three of us get stuck at some point in our lives and some of us push other ones out of
Oh,
the
story
snowbank.
here.
Yep.
I have no knowledge of being stuck anywhere.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure you don't. Yep.
I
I
know your parents lost a delivery garbage can once because they
oh,
put it in a bad spot, but I
yeah,
didn't get
wow.
stuck.
Offside of the driveway. Yeah, this is going back many years to Tom with a rear wheel drive pickup truck and
Mm.
a lot of fishtails and Tom not knowing how to drive it and up a very short driveway in the winter.
That's your version. That's fine. Um, so a lot of it though, with we were talking about like your snow mode is nothing more than traction control, like traction control, ABS, remote start, like all these things are just synonymous equivalents to from an ICE vehicle to an EV vehicle. Preconditioning is remote start, essentially. Traction control is like snow mode,
Uh yeah.
or is that too big of a
Layman
generalization?
term,
Yeah,
yes.
it's close. I mean, I think it's close enough. It's
Yep.
analogous that, there's obviously going to be some minor differences, but for
Yeah.
yeah, in general, yes.
Like I know that
Yeah.
the in a gas vehicle that there isn't a heater for the gas tank. Like I know that, but like there isn't an EV battery, but essentially you're remote starting it.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Mike, what's your experience charging in the winter? Because the batteries have to be warmer to charge. So does it take longer because the batteries have to be warmed up, or what's your experience with that?
So with Teslas, when you get if you're going to a supercharger, at least now they didn't used to do this, but over the last few years, this has been put in place. They will precondition themselves. They know that within a certain distance, they need to start warming up that battery, and so when you get to that supercharger, it's ready to go. Now there's some newer vehicles that do that, and some other ones that do not. Um, a lot of it has to do with do they know you're coming up on a DC fast charger? Then so is you got to make sure that's in your navigation and the car is aware of it because if it's not, there's obviously it's not going to know that you're intending to charge.
Hmm, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I will say too, it's kind of interesting on the EV6 app. At least you can go in and look at your trips, and it'll show you how much electricity you use for actual propulsion of the vehicle, how much you use for cabin, how much you use for battery conditioning, and then how much you use for like charging your phone. And so all summer has been zero on battery conditioning, never ever. But now I'm seeing if you're driving, especially in the mornings, it's been in the 40s. It's been getting up, into the 70s in the afternoon. It's just really interesting to go take my daughter to school using some electricity for battery conditioning. And then when I go pick her up in the afternoon at 70, it uses none. So I'm really curious to see as the winter goes how much, electricity it takes for battery conditioning and just really keep an eye on what that looks like.
Yep. It's a factor for sure. But there's ways to mitigate it.
Cool.
Cool.
So things that we're going to look at a little bit closer going further or going ahead in further episodes. We're going to have a tire expert on that's going to be able to talk to us about EV tires and rubber composition and the rolling resistance that you already mentioned in this episode and things like that we have to look forward to. And then we're also going to have Aaron Jones back on to talk just about heat pumps and the different heating elements and whatnot that are going to go into different EVs and why they're more efficient.
I'll bring real world driving in the snow in northern Michigan, which probably gets more snow than most places in the country. So I'll bring real world examples of the range, what I'm seeing driving in the snow with snow mode. So I'll just be talking about that. Hopefully not for a
Yeah.
while. It's still October.
We got
Hopefully we're not talking about that for a few more
we got a
months.
couple
But
Yeah, and
months.
I really want to I just want to rip on Tom the next few podcasts. So let's make sure we all listen in for that.
Okay, so hopefully, like tomorrow, we're recording what first part of October. I guess Ford does their scheduling for production like every Thursday. So I'm crossing
Hmm.
my fingers. I get an email tomorrow because allegedly I'm priority one according to my Ford dealer, which could just be them blowing smoke to get me to stop calling them every week and looking for updates. But
We'll see.
I don't know.
can't wait to hear. Let us know, Tom.
Yep.
Okay. All right. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Plug In for More. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, check out the one-stop EV marketplace, evuniverse.com. Until next time.